In a world of constant evolution, where the line between man and machine begins to blur, a new age of possibility emerges. Where humanity is augmented to achieve what was once thought impossible. Welcome to the age of cybernetics.
Yo, Descendants, we are back in TFT. I hope you guys are enjoying Season 3 as much as we have been. I want to bring you my Nell build guide. We have spent the last week now playing her and like min-maxing and just getting a real feel for her and getting her comfy with all the different builds. She is really strong. She can do bossing, she can do mobbing, she can pretty much just do anything. She is a lot of work though, because you kind of do have to spam like the E-Civ thing to proc her passive, then to like hit with your first ability to get the resources for your fourth ability. That's a little bit of work, but she does a crazy amount of damage. You definitely do get rewarded for the amount of work you do. I kind of think of her as like an Innis with highest single target damage. Her AoE is not as crazy as Innis, but her single target damage is way higher. So you can kind of get away with like decent mobbing. And then you have like on-demand burst damage with your 1 and your 4 to just take out elites, especially in the Axion planes. I think she is one of the best Descendants to go ahead and farm the Axion planes. So without further ado, let's just hop straight into it and I'll show you guys my bossing build and my mobbing build that we have for now. So first up, let's talk about her abilities. Her first ability is a Q, and this is just a spamming like little Q that you can do. It does a projectile. Does quite a large amount of damage, and also if you hit your E-Civ, it's going to scan them, activating her passive. You can see the little triangle they have on them. And now when you hit them with your Q, it's going to do more damage, but it's also going to give you your resource down below. You can see her custom resource down below under the MP bar, and that lets you go ahead and use your 4 ability. Go ahead and use that. It's just a massive spike. It does a ton of damage. So if you go ahead and we hit this all again, get all the stacks with the E-Civ up, you go ahead and then boom, it's just crazy damage, especially if it does AoE. We can hit the ground like this. You hit the ground a little bit and it's going to AoE and just hit. There we go. Look at that. It's a massive amount of damage. Crazy, ridiculous damage. So 1 and 4 projectiles. You need to use your E-Civ quite often to get the custom resource using the 1. And then if you go ahead and place her 2 down, this is just her massive AoE. And this is pretty much what you're going to go ahead and spam to do AoE mobbing. It does put a dot on the ground, and if you press it again, it explodes and does like a nice big chunk of burst damage. So that hit them for like 4 mil over there. Go ahead and replace it, and then what I mainly do is I just use my V to pull the enemies together. That is like a toe ability. You have to do that once you press your second ability. So you lay down the stuff on the ground and then you can pull them together. Now you can scan them and you can go ahead and shoot them with your first ability, and you can shoot them with your 4 ability again, and it just does a ton of damage. That's basically how her abilities work. 1 is a projectile, 2 is AoE on the ground, 3 pulls them all together, and then 4 does a massive burst damage with her custom resource. And then you can also double tap your second ability to do the explosion, but her kit really synergizes and works well together. Now if we have a look at the module setup, for the mobbing setup, we're running just the basic standard stuff, as much cooldown as possible, so you can go ahead and spam all your abilities, especially your AoE to pull everything together to hit them with your 1, and then your 4 you pretty much just use this on elites. Although most of the time elites will pretty much die just by using your 1 ability. If you have your E-Civ, so your passive scan, your Shattered Heart, you have that on them and you hit them with the 1, it's pretty much going to kill most bosses in the game, except for when you're doing like void bosses or something like a big chunky boss. Then you can go ahead and hit your End of Suspicion, the maximum damage, spike them to death. So if we have a look at our mods now, we are running Shattered Heart. This is her Transcendence module. I highly recommend it. It does add a ton of crit to her, so that's why we have built her out for crit. Without the Shattered Heart, it's kind of hard to build her for crit, because I think her base crit is at like 5%. So you really want to get the Shattered Heart mod, and I use this for mobbing and for bossing, so you definitely want to make sure you get this. Then we're just running a ton of cooldown with Nimble Fingers, MP Conversion, Focus on Non-Attribute, and then we prefer to use Focus on Tech. A lot of people for the mobbing build, at least they like to go with Fusion because it will increase the damage on her AoE, but pretty much everything is dying with this AoE anyway, and I kind of use my AoE more of like a quality of life to pull them together to hit them with my 1 ability, because the range on this thing actually is quite decent when it explodes. So that's why I prefer to go Focus on Tech, and then you also do have the increased damage on your 4 and your 1 when you get to the bigger, chunkier elites. In the Axion planes, I have no problems with this build AoEing. Dropping down my AoE just murders everything, and then I have the big chunky damage on my projectiles. Then we are running 3 crit mods. We're running Skill Concentration, Skill Insight for crit damage, crit chance, and then we're running Emergency Measures over the other purple mod because this one gives us crit chance. Now you might say, why don't you run the other one for the crit damage? But with this mod on, we are actually, if we have a look at our crit chance, we're sitting at 98% crit chance, so we don't have the crit from that one. We'll be going a little bit under that. I think we'll end up with like 85% crit. So it's still good. You will get a little bit more crit damage, but I prefer just to have a little bit more consistency. Ultimately, you can never really hit 100% crit because of like enemies, resistances and stuff like that. But overall, I like to choose the emergency measures for the crit rate and the critical damage. And then for the range side of things, we have skill expansion as well as amp control. And we also do have some range in the Arche tuning tree. I have tried without amp control. This is very optional. That's up to you. Without amp control, if I place my AoE right here, so I'll show you guys, this is with amp control. This is the AoE you're looking at. Without amp control, literally it just goes to here. So you're missing like this little edge over here. Although it does add up, especially for the mobs like around corners and stuff when you're doing 400s, and they get pretty annoying sometimes. So that little space over there, that will be all the way around the ring, and that does add up with amp control. If you do add the maximized range, however, you'll be going over your range cap, because you can only extend these things by like 300% on the AoE. So if you do use maximized range over amp control, you'll be overcapping on range. You'll kind of be wasting a little bit of range, and you also get the negative modifier. That's why we prefer to use amp control, but really you could put whatever you want there. This could be your comfort slot. So if you want like MP collector, HP collector, or maximize conservation, anything you want can really go into that spot. However, I do prefer getting that little bit of range when you are running 400s, and you can literally just place down your ground AoEs and it just kills everything instantly. Having that little bit of AoE does help quite a bit. And then lastly, we have our HP mod. We run HP amp because losing that little bit of shield doesn't really do much, and it does give you a little bit more HP than the normal blue HP mod. And then we are using Power Beyond because this does give you quite a bit of extra damage. I think it might actually be bugged and not working correctly, but people have done a lot of testing with this, and it does seem to give you a big boost damage. It also does cause toe on enemies every now and then, so you could then use your Slayer set to go ahead and get MP back by enemies getting towed, but I don't use Slayer set. We'll talk about that in a second once we get to components. So mainly we're just using this for the massive amount of damage increase, although she doesn't really need it. So Power Beyond is what we've ended up using, although you can pretty much use whatever you want. Death by 1,000 cuts is pretty good too. We'll do like these little AoE projectiles and stuff, but usually by the time this procs, all the enemies are dead anyway. That's why we just stick with Power Beyond to increase our damage. And then if we have a quick look at the mods we use for bossing, we really just dropped the HP and the range, and we went ahead and picked up Dangerous Ambush, Enlightenment, and then we also picked up the other crit mod, Frontlines, giving us a little bit more crit damage and then capping us out at that critical hit rate. If we have a look at the mobbing build difference, you can see that we've got Expansion, HP Amp, and Amp Control. Those are the only 3 mods we use differently. Coming over to bossing, we just use the 3 that I showed you before. Now with Enlightenment, you could switch this out to maximize conservation if you are missing quite a few of your shots. Like I found when I was doing Hangman, if I miss one of my 4s, Enlightenment's going to be pretty tight to try and get the MP that you need to kill the boss. But with Enlightenment, and if you're pretty accurate and not missing your 4s, you don't really mess up too much in the boss fight. You will have just enough MP to go ahead and kill the boss if you do have maxed MP on your sensor, which you obviously do want to go ahead and make sure you do have that max roll MP on your sensor as well. But other than that, the bossing build stays relatively the same, obviously with the addition of the extra crit mod as well, because you really just want as much damage as possible. And then with Dangerous Ambush, you could also use the Hyper Focus mod, but this one's kind of weird because when you land a skill critical hit, it's going to give you the gun critical hit damage, and then when you land a gun critical hit, it's going to give you the skill critical hit damage. It's just really strong because it is a lot of skill critical hit damage. But when you land one skill attack with this buff, it's going to then give you the gun buff because you are critting with your skill. So you kind of have to like weave in shooting with your skills as well. So you can technically do that. Remove Dangerous Ambush if you're not knocking down the enemy quite often. But if you have done the fight quite a few times and you practice now and you're landing most of your shots, you should be knocking down the boss quite often. So Dangerous Ambush will actually be proccing for you fairly often. And for me, this was giving me more consistent runs of about 40-45 seconds. However, with Hyper Focus, I did have one outlier where I got a run done in like 34 seconds. So if you can get Hyper Focus to land and work really good, that extra crit damage does do quite a bit of damage, although you'll have to play around with it and see which one fits your playstyle better. And then our reactor for mobbing is going to be non-attribute skill cooldown, obviously with a tech non-attribute reactor. And we are using the Secret Garden because all of her main big damaging skills will be a tech skill. So this will give you the pest control to give you increased damage on tech. So getting a Secret Garden and then obviously mounting it for the tech rifle would be really good. Non-attribute skill cooldown for mobbing. You could also go with cooldown and crit damage. It's up to you. This is however the one that I got. So I just decided to stick with it because she's got so much damage it doesn't really matter. And then since we are on reactors, I'll show you guys the bossing reactor real quick. The only difference is you switch out the damage for additional damage while attacking Colossus, and you 100% do want the cooldown. If you don't have the cooldown on the bossing reactor, you are going to struggle to go ahead and kill Hangman because your first ability won't reset as fast as possible. That way you can't build your stacks to get your 4 ability. So you really want to make sure you do have cooldown on your reactor. And then for our component set, we are running the same component set for bossing and mobbing. We are using the Enlightened Mage. This just gives you a ton of skill power as well as non-attribute skill power. You can see on the top line is skill power, and the bottom line we're getting the skill power non-attribute because of the true stacks, getting up to 84% increased non-attribute skill power, so just a ton of extra damage. And the stats on these aren't the greatest since we do have 2 with shield on them. Got 1 with defense and 1 with HP, but overall we're looking at like 13.2k HP, almost 40k defense, so pretty tanky overall. And obviously we have a ton of damage, just murder everything before it even gets close to us. You can go with the Slayer set and then use Toe if you're having problems with MP. I personally have not had any issues with MP with her yet, but that is something you could do. So switch over to the Slayer set because when defeating enemies inflicted with Toad, recovers your MP and special resource by 17% and a 12.2% chance. So if you're really struggling on MP, go ahead and try Slayer set. And then her third ability, as you can see there, does have the Toad tag, as well as Power Beyond also makes enemies tow. Whenever you are towing enemies, that will give you back some MP at obviously that chance there. But since you do tow quite a lot of enemies with mobbing, you can go ahead and regen your MP pretty easily with the Slayer set. Damage wise, I think Enlightened Mage is slightly higher than Slayer set. So up to you, those are the options, but I would suggest using Enlightened Mage. And then for Inversion reinforcements, we like to run with Arche Circulation Tactic for some cooldown. Your Toxic Round Focus or whatever round focus, really just run this for the passive. If you shoot any enemy like 5 times, you'll get this passive on them, reducing all of their attribute resistances. So this I pretty much just leave on for mobbing and for bossing. You can see I changed that over there, but really I just use bossing for mobbing and bossing, because if you shoot the elites once you get to Axiom Plains, you just shoot them with your Secret Garden a couple of times and it's to give them this debuff, and then you can end up doing more damage with your skills. So that's why I like to run this on pretty much all setups, and then Selective Neurostim just for the random boosts of MP. And then lastly, we have a look at our Arche tuning. This is our one for mobbing setup. As we come over to the right here, grab the skill power, grab the range, skill cost, all the skill power going up, and the MP. And we come across the left to grab the critical skill damage, since we are critting like 98% of the time. The cooldown as well, and we go up the right side, grab our mutant cell, and we are going to use non-attribute cohesion. When you defeat enemies, you'll just get a non-attribute skill power stacking buff, just giving you more skill power. And then the change we make for bossing is a very minor change. You can see we just really take the Colossus damage over the range. Since we don't really need that range, we are pretty much good on the boss, and we've got everything else exactly the same. But we do switch out our mutant cell to final prep and give you that nice little skill power boost to your 4 ability when you are using your 4 ability. Obviously, we'll be spamming that to go ahead and murder the boss as fast as possible. And that's really all there is to the Nell build. So she's really good at bossing and mobbing. Just go out there, have some fun with her. Only thing, she's a little bit spammy, so you do want to make sure you spam that ESIF to get your passive to proc, as well as to build up your custom resource. Other than that, I would highly recommend her. She's really fun and does a ton of damage. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. Hopefully you found it helpful. If you did, please drop a like and sub the channel. It helps me out so much. And we'll be streaming over at twitch.tv/Augiesaint later on today. So drop on by and come check us out. We'll be farming some of the Axiom Plains and updating a bunch of the Descendant builds since we have now returned for Season 3. Let me know how you guys are enjoying Season 3 down below, and I'll catch you beautiful people in the next one. Augiesaint out.
Run free and dive into the sky. Hear the wind crying